Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Retribution Review. This is a custom campaign made by WizardWorks in 1998, just a scarce few months after Brood War's initial release. Actually, Vanilla's initial release. This actually predates Brood War, which is something of a trivia fact in and of itself. Something to keep in mind as we progress through this review. Something to couch our analysis and our critique in, as it is a very dated product. And I do say product very deliberately. Sometimes I misspeak and call a custom campaign a product when I mean to say project, because of course they are very similar words, and I am not the most adept at the English language despite speaking it all my life. But this was a product. And just on its face, it's obviously not great. It's obviously not of an exceedingly high quality. And the caliber of experience we had with Retribution does not lend well to the feeling that you were, getting an experience worth paying for, right? That you were getting your money's worth as far as the gameplay that we experienced, even the story, if you value that in a game, and all that stuff. Despite the fact that it is over 20 years old now, Retribution was not a fun experience, and even for its time, I don't think that it was worth any money. But we do get some analysis, some value out of critiquing it as both a custom campaign and a commercial product, and it is one of those few times where I can really tackle something from both angles. So I feel like it's an interesting enough job, an interesting enough task, and so we're going to handle it that way. Let's talk about it as first, Retribution, the custom campaign. Then we'll talk about Retribution, the commercial product. So Retribution offers a crazy amount, actually, of run-of-the-mill macro missions, insofar as the maps are rarely offensive in their design, and they allow players of all skill levels, playstyles, preferences, walks of life, genders even, to find success without too much pomp or circumstance, right? You're not really required to field a very specific unit composition. Certainly, there's going to be some strategies that are significantly better than others, but you're not required to field any one strategy, any one tech path, any one set of executions. You don't have to expand here and attack here in this order and do this and that point and this time. There's nothing really like that in any of the maps. There may be some instances where if you're a particularly poor player, you need to do something by a certain point, but that's more of an organic timer that you'll find in pretty much anything, where eventually the AI in an RTS is going to beat you if you do nothing, right? If you're AFK the whole time. We would hope it would beat us anyways under those circumstances. So insofar as you're looking for a very basic RTS experience, most of the missions in Retribution, solve that conundrum. They offer that experience for you. It has all the polish you would expect from a campaign made in 1998, which is to say it has no polish at all. Especially as the project progressed, we found more bugs and more really poorly designed maps, not just because of the layouts being something that interrupted gameplay, where you see these layouts where you start in one corner, end in the other, and you have to take the longest possible path to get there, because there's only one pathway between you and the enemy base. Stuff like that happened all the time, especially, like I said, as the campaign went on. But also, like I said, we found bugs. We found maps that had no detail at all, no terrain at all, barely any height at all. This is stuff that your first map that you make in StarCraft 1, stuff that you really should not be including in something that is any kind of production that you take seriously, let alone a paid production, a premium product. So that was definitely something that was not really a point in its favor. But again, it's something that was made in 1998. If we consider it a custom campaign made in 1998 as opposed to a commercial product, this is probably what we would expect. People just fooling around and started it for the first time. The story was incredibly easily ignored, something that you really didn't have to pay much attention to. And in fact, there really wasn't that much to pay attention to. So while it was easy to ignore the shortcomings of Retribution's story, I have to also account for those shortcomings in this review. The story was very thin, very generic. You're just chasing after this MacGuffin, and no matter which race you are, you're chasing after this MacGuffin. There's not even any payoff. You don't really see the result of it. You just know that everybody's fighting for it. You can infer based on the amount of times you have to play a mission killing the enemy's base and all of their missile turrets on fucking islands that this must be an important artifact, object, whatever, this MacGuffin clearly is of some interest and some importance to all of the factions that you see in this campaign, and yet you don't get to see what it was for, what all of this bloodshed and all of this fighting was for. Basically, the campaign has no ending, and that in and of itself is kind of unforgivable, especially just because like it seems like you didn't even write a story, like you didn't finish your story, you didn't finish your project. So that is definitely a fault of the campaign. And even the way that it's presented is not great either, because if you're looking at it the same way that I'm looking at it, you're seeing, 1 or 2 transmissions in a briefing, maybe like max 4 transmissions in a briefing. You'll get max 1 transmission in game, which is like, Archimedes saying victory for the Dominion at the end. I think the Protoss guy, Kisrath, says like, time to finish the job, which is where the finishing the job title came from for the first video. I don't even think there was a line in the last Zerg map, so really there's, you get very occasional dialogue in-game, like very, very infrequent, and then you get, 1 or 2 paragraphs worth of dialogue in the briefings, sometimes in ways that drag on, which is really surprising. Like, I felt very surprised that while I was watching some of the briefings, in particular in the Zerg campaign, we were falling asleep partway through the campaign. We were, like, just zoning out, not just in terms of gameplay, but just in the briefing rooms. Like, how do you accomplish that when you barely have any content at all, barely have any dialogue at all? I don't know how you manage to make your characters sound droning. Both Archimedes and the that Zerg guy, I already forget the server's name, which is not great. I think Zargil or something. I don't know. I think that's from Insurrection. Whatever, whoever this guy was, we both of them droned on a lot, and they were very forgettable. They were, obviously, I've already forgotten one of their names. They were very poor in terms of like keeping you engaged from a vocal standpoint, and that's something that you definitely could have fixed without too much issue. So overall, not really my cup of tea. I feel like the story was a swing and a miss, and a pretty clear miss too. Like, they didn't even hit the ball, they didn't even scrape the ball. The ball pelted them in the head. I'm talking about baseball, if you don't know what I'm talking about. So that's where swing and a miss comes from, as far as I'm aware. And swing and a miss they did. Miss they fucking did. As it waned, the campaign got pretty terrible. Like I mentioned earlier, the level design, the sensation that you're just meandering through a sea of pre-placed units, poorly designed maps, undesigned maps that don't have any design associated with them, so you can't even really call them poorly designed because they didn't even start to design and then not do anymore. They just didn't do any work at all. Like, some of these maps probably took about 5 minutes to make in terms of the terrain and unit placement. Like, you could make, I would say, at least half of one of the 3 campaigns we played, so at least 1/6 of this campaign could have been made in 4 hours for a map crap. That is psychotic in and of itself, when you consider that just what the caliber of maps we've been seeing and playing for map crap in these 4-hour contests is actually way better than the stuff that Retribution showcased. Sure, it's something you can say, you can take a positive spin on that, and you can say, wow, look how far we've come, that in 4 hours we can make something better than a premium Blizzard endorsed product. yeah, we sure can, man. But that's I take that as points in this campaign's detriment against this campaign, not in the favor of the modern day. It's just sort of a byproduct of people learning, sure, but this is pretty bad, man. And though it suffers overall, Retribution that is, from monotony, a very clear lack of effort and testing with your AI bugs and your poor level designs or non-existent level designs, it's a very average, very mediocre baseline. This is kind of the standard that all current and future custom content should be able to blitz past with ease. You should not be struggling to make something as good as Retribution, if you can even say as good as Retribution and take yourself seriously. You should not be worried about that whatsoever. And so that brings us to really the closing of the discussion as a custom campaign. That was pretty much all it offered us. As a commercial product, it was much worse. It bears no resemblance to a product that does not waste your time and money, that a product that is worth your time and money. The obligation that a company has to produce a polished, tested, feature-complete product that thusly is worth your time and money, that was not met in any way by the end result. At no point did Retribution engage the player with their opponents no point in this campaign did I, as a player, feel like I was even playing against a facsimile of a real opponent, which is what you would want. At least you would want to feel like you're fighting somebody, like you feel like you're sort of fighting the UED in To Slay the Beast, or you're fighting against all three of the enemy factions that are still there to, stand against you in Omega. Like, those are the two maps that everybody points to say like their most fond memories of StarCraft. Those are widely received as the best maps. And at no point did this campaign even come close to that. And that's not difficult to achieve. You just have some characters and they say some lines to you, and you have some past experience with them so that the lines that they're saying now and the actions they're taking against you feel like they are real characters and really like actually there in the story, and aren't just, there for the sake of giving you a fucking adjutant and some objectives. And they sit there, they oppose you, they attack you. Like, it doesn't take much, man. It really doesn't take much to establish the illusion that you're playing against a, real opponent, a facsimile of a real opponent. This whole thing was just a total shit show. It wasn't worth the investment that any consumer offered. It wasn't even worth the time it took to complete it. Because again, even though I didn't pay for it, I still have to review this product as if it were something that I, as a consumer, a prospective consumer, or you as a consumer, would pay for. And thus, I would not think that my time was, spent well, my money was spent well. Especially if I don't even think that as a free product, I would play it to completion. Again, if the recording streaming buttons were not being pushed in this case, which is certainly true in this case. Despite the fact that as a custom campaign, it serves its purpose very well, very unceremoniously. I won't say very well. That would be much too promising, much too positive. Despite the fact that as a custom campaign, it serves its purpose in a mediocre manner that is just very unceremonious. It does its job. It's in and out. It's very quick. There's a lot of flaws. There's very little effort, very little testing, but at least you're playing StarCraft for most of the maps. Despite that, that's what you might expect. Those are like the baseline expectations for a custom campaign, especially made in very, very soon after the release of StarCraft. But as a commercial product, it just completely fails to deliver. It's not something that you should be spending money on. It's not something that anybody should have to spend their money on. It's not something that most people would ever spend their time on either. And that's like the key distinction too, is because time is way more important than money for most people. And as a result, if you're wasting your time on something, it's even worse. So that's why I hope that I was able to get some sort of educational purpose, or at the very least create some entertainment that people found, de-stressing in that manner, right? People look at comedians. Well, I wouldn't call myself a comedian per se, but hopefully you found some of my anger and frustration and falling asleep and tirades in the middle of these streams to be somewhat entertaining and comedic. And again, you really can't get too upset about Retribution, essentially scamming people for money, because this is a product that's as old as StarCraft itself. So anybody who got scammed in this manner by WizardWorks has hopefully long since recovered from like the $10 or however much it was. The main takeaway is that this product and products like it, because they still do exist in the modern day industry, like DLC that's has no effort put into it compared to the mainstay of the main content, they're not worth their cost in any way. And the level of quality that you experience from them and from Retribution as well, it's only justifiable as, again, a hobbyist project that was made in like a weekend with, again, no effort, no testing, no QA, just deadpan released, sent out there. You download it off of some enthusiast website and you say, I wonder how this is. And you play the first couple maps and then you quit because it's not going anywhere. That's what we would expect from something like this, not that this was sold for money. So that's the real, amount of depravity. And I have a feeling that a lot of what I said about the commercial side of things will be echoed in my feelings for Insurrection, which we're playing next. But if that is the case, obviously I'm not going to restate my position. I've already said so in here. As far as the campaign itself, I don't think that there was too much to learn from it on a technical level, because again, it was all done through pretty much the same AI scripts being run every mission, especially in the Zerg campaign. Pretty poor level design. You could have AI that were incompetent, but still have a level design that was salvageable, and not at any point did I feel that was the case in this. So you can't really look at this as an example of anything done well. It's pretty much just like the bare minimum necessary to make me feel like maybe they almost gave a fuck. They definitely didn't engage the player at a bare minimum, like I talked about in the bonus maps. You want to aim for around 100 to 120 APM for any old player, because that's the bare minimum you need to be engaged. Maybe not me when I'm streaming, but when I'm streaming, I'm talking to people, and like there's so much more shit that I'm doing. There's a reason why people watch anime or whatever in their second monitor while they're playing video games most of the time. Is because the video games themselves are not engaging enough of an experience. Whereas obviously, in an ideal situation, you wouldn't really be able to look at chat or look at your anime or whatever you're doing on your second monitor while you're playing, because you'd be so engrossed and immersed in the playing experience. You'd have to focus so much, not just because of your own skill level, but because that game was that engaging, and that was the whole point. Most people see games as like accessories to other things, podcasts, or whatever else you're using to fill in the rest of your space, because you're not actually being fully engaged. Which is why I play stuff like Counter-Strike or just Brood War itself against, I play some of my own maps or whatever, play some of other people's maps, just so that I can have an experience that is fully engaging and engrossing, and not have to worry about like filling in the gaps with some other accessory media. And unfortunately, we didn't get anything remotely close to the experience of being fully engrossed and engaged in Retribution. I have a feeling we're probably not going to ever in our saga of playing StarCraft content, especially the old stuff. But hopefully it was at the very least elucidating in that sense. You could get something out of it from an educational standpoint, and hopefully you stayed along for the memes as well and had a good laugh or two. That's all I got for Retribution, so I will say goodbye to you. Bye.